Nadine, I'd love to start with you. We've faced challenges last year and going into this year that I don't think any of us were ever expecting to have to, just even contemplate. So I wanted to start with you and just ask, how was last year for you? How are you? And how did you find last year?
Last year was obviously, like you said, very challenging, but I also found it rewarding. I tend to look at challenge as an opportunity to kind of show up. I had a conversation with one of our BAMs, and that's what she said, that 2020 kind of taught her how to say yes and show up. So for 2021, that's what she's going to do, is show up. So for me, it was an opportunity to kind of dig into some past strengths that I had to use when I owned my own virtual assistant company. And, get back into learning more tech tips, finding out ways that I could really connect with my executive. Because of course, the distance and the space between us made it very difficult. It also was challenging because I'm at home with all of my children and my husband. We're all in the same space every day, 24/7, around the clock. So, and so it's just those challenges were quite extensive, but also rewarding, because I don't, like I said, I don't try to look at challenges as something that is a roadblock, but something to try to overcome. So, yeah.
Yeah, I completely know where you're coming from. Also at home with the other half and the children.
Yes.
In its own way, isn't it? Julia, and to you, how did you find last year? I know Nadine is in the States and you're in Norway. How was it there for you, and how did you find 2020?
2020 was a challenging year. It was for all us. And as Nadine said, it was also a year where we could learn a lot. And I think knowing our limits, some limits and weaknesses that we didn't know about ourselves, maybe, that came up, and that we had to manage with this and discover new ways to not to work, but also to live at home, because we have our work in our homes, in our kitchen, in our bedroom or bathroom, whatever, So, and all these challenging things, they were very demanding for our minds and health to cope with. And but I liked very much that this urgency that came up about understanding and accepting that we really need each other, and being connected. It's very, very important. I am an introvert, and still I miss people. I miss being surrounded by people. And then I realized that, wow, people, they give me energy. It's not what I thought, that I just was giving and not getting energy from people. And I realized, yes, because I remember when I went to the office the first time after the first lockdown, and my CEO, she looked at me, "Oh, Julia, I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy that you're here." And then I said, well, when I went home, I was so happy, because I was again in contact with people, and all these things we learned about ourselves and about people, and the importance of helping people, supporting, collaboration, partnership with our neighbors, our communities of assistance, that we have to give each other whatever we can to help people cope with this situation. So I think I learned a lot, and it was a lot of opportunities for growth in 2020. And I'm feeling very well now, and because I'm getting with me all these success stories from 2020 to help me start this new year with a very positive mindset.
That's great. It's amazing you don't realise what you miss until it's gone, do you? Especially when you didn't think that you particularly, like you said, an introvert, particularly enjoyed it, being surrounded by people anyway. It's amazing you go, oh, actually, you do need it. We all need it in some form or another, for sure. And Shirwyn, over to you. How was last year for you?
So I'm quite the opposite of Julius. I'm quite an extrovert and obviously needing people around. And especially when you're in the office, I think, like Julia was saying, you feed off the people and they give you this energy to keep going and doing your best. I mean, I think majority of the world went into lockdown after March or February, late February, early March last year, and I think we haven't come out of it yet. And for me, I think the first 3 months were the hardest. And just getting to know how, or trying to understand how to do your work, I think was a big part of the first 3 months of learning for me. So how to work with the executives remotely when you're used to having them in your face all the time. How to give them the answers they need when you can't see or feel what their expressions are, or you don't see past your desk and you know that they're upset, or you've got to reach out. I think that was a big learning curve for me, was reaching out to each of them on a daily basis, just even if it's just for a check-in and a 5-minute conversation, just to find out how's your day been, how's the meetings been, what's going on, because we all know executives, what they tend to do is they tend to just continue unless you prompt them. They're not going to tell you what's going on. So the first 3 months was me learning to just actually make a concerted effort to like ping them every 2 hours, going, are you all right? What do you need? I felt like a babysitter, just going through the motions, checking up on them all the time. But like Nadine said, what last year did for us was it did give us something to get over. It put hurdles in our path that we weren't sure. It wasn't a race that we'd run before. No one had known what was going to happen or what the future was going to hold. So each of us in our own way decided and started and created some sort of coping mechanism to get through it. And in large part, the entire world has gotten through it in a really good manner. I mean, yes, we've lost quite a few people to the pandemic, but I think a lot of people have come out on the other side, or almost the other side, a lot better. Families are closer because they spend a lot more time together. And if you think about it, you spend like, I think more than half of your time you spend in the office. So now you're spending 24 hours with your family. Yes, you're juggling work and you're juggling play and you're juggling school, but you tend to think about it when you go to bed, before you go to bed. Well, I actually enjoyed today. There were a few nights where I went to bed and I went, yes, it was manic, but I enjoyed it. And then going into 2021, again, it's given us a lot of food for thought as to how we need to change the role that we do, and how we need to go forward with it. I think what it's shown the world is that you don't have to get on a plane every 2 days to have business meetings. You could do it from the comfort of your home or your office, if that's the case. I always look back and I saw those pictures of like the Trevi Fountain and the rivers in different continents that have cleared up because there aren't any people around. And that to me is like a sign, because it actually cleared my mind in terms of being able to focus on what is important and in front of us, and to put the things that aren't important and aren't very pressing behind, like put it down the list and start concentrating and building yourself up. 2020 gave me a lot of time to build my skills, and I think that's where assistants are heading in 2021, is to make sure that you maintain and you increase the skills that you have. Not only the soft skills or the 3 T's, as we say, Nikki, key, typing, and travel, not only those, but those skills that are necessary to read people, to think analytically, think out the box. What can I do to help when I'm not close by? So that's what 2021 is bringing to me, is to make sure that I can help whoever I'm working with be the best that they can be. And then also in what that will do for me is then make me the best at what I do. So yeah, 2021 is going to be a banger. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that we see the end of COVID. I think it'll be around for a while still, but it's going to give people opportunities that they never thought they had in terms of growing their role and growing their skills.
Yeah, there's so much that I agree with. It's amazing how all of us have coped with last year, managing our jobs, most of us having family at home, while there's been this constant low level of anxiety. I don't know if you guys have felt that as well, where there's just, I felt this, where there's just a constant level of anxiety about particularly around the first few months, going out, I'm not sure how bad, how bad the pandemic was going to be. And then having a sense of normality, but then, going in and out of lockdowns. It's amazing that we've all managed to keep going despite a constant anxiety that we all have, for sure. But I wanted to pick up on what you were saying there, moving into 2021. What I really appreciate talking with the three of you is that you're all working as assistants at the moment, as well as running networks and training and all of the other amazing things that you do. So I wanted to talk about your experiences moving into next year and what your networks are feeling and saying to you about how they feel about going forward. Now that we are on the whole working from home, having to communicate differently with our executives, our roles have changed because there's not so much of the travel element and other admin functions that we've been doing. So, Julia, if we come to you, how has your network been responding, and assistants that you talk to on a regular basis, about their hopes and challenges for this year?
Many of them, they are still quite tired and frustrated and confused because the impact of the last year is still here in 2021, and a lot of uncertainty. We know that the economy worldwide is still quite unstable, and there is a lot of people still being unemployed and being made redundant and losing jobs and not knowing exactly what is going to happen with them, their roles, their positions in the company. So it's still a lot of uncertainty. And but I think what keeps people in a positive mindset, I think it's the fact that the assistants, we have a very engaged network, and groups and associations. They are really showing up and helping people and putting people together, connecting people via webinars and events. So I feel that there is a lot of tension in the air still, and but on the other side, we know already, we have already good lessons from last year, or best practices that we can keep on using, applying to this year, and keep on supporting each other, keeping the networking going on online and virtually, because that's what we need. That's what we still need in this moment. So like, feel that the other people, they are still also struggling, but they are doing, what are they doing to cope with the situation? What can we learn from other people? So I think now this is really something that people are starting the year with, like being connected in their associations, their networks, through the webinars and all the platforms that are being given us to allow us to keep in connection with each other.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, one of the reasons I set up Practically Perfect PA was because at the time I was the only assistant in my department, and actually on the entire floor that I worked on. And I realized I needed to network and get to know other assistants. And now more than ever, we need that when we're, particularly assistants are the only assistant in their business or, big departments, and they're working from home. That disconnect is felt more than ever. Nadine, what's the feeling in the network that you run? How are people looking towards this year?
I think we all, especially now that we're working from home, there's a sense of self realization and assurance and things that we're all facing because we're set aside from everyone else. And so, to Julia's point about people coping and building community, you all know that I run Black Admin Magic, which is now going to be the National Association of Black Administrative Professionals. But the thing that we focus on within our community, and everyone's talking about, is the conversation of diversity and inclusion and equity, also being a part of the assistance role. That we have something to add to that conversation. And there is buzz and excitement about assistants coming to the table, being included in organizations where they may be the only person of color at the table. Recently I did an article, interview, a blog, and I was asked, what is the difference between Black administrative professionals, or the experiences of Black administrative professionals than that of other administrative professionals? And my response centered around the fact that before any of us are our profession, before we go to work, we are a person, an individual outside of our profession. So I'm a Black woman, or if you're a woman of Indian descent, or if you are from the Latinx community, that's who you are. You wear that before you come to the table. So I think, so circling back, we all have had to reset our lives. We're in our families, we're looking at ourselves, doing internal, I hope, evaluations, exploring opportunities. And I know COVID has got us to that place. The pandemic has made it to where we can take that time and look inward at our beliefs, look inward at how we feel, and look inward and answer the question, who am I? What do I bring to the table? And then now we can come in 2021 and start to bring our authentic selves to the table, to the conversation as a whole, right? And collaborate and start to have these real conversations about what we are dealing with in our nation, in our world. Yeah. Because if anything, as I believe has taught us, and if you are human, the pandemic should have taught us that we all are affected by the same thing, regardless of race. It's not like COVID or the pandemic attacked only this group of people or this group of people. We are human. And so we all have to understand that we are all one and the same. So that leads me to the point of just leveling the playing field. One of the conversations that, we want to really have is, equity in pay for Black administrative professionals in comparison to their white counterparts, especially in the tech sector. So, there's just so much that we can have more of a robust conversation around, but we're looking forward to these conversations being had more, of course, and just excited about what's coming beyond.
And has it felt like these conversations are more willing to be had than they were previously?
I believe so. Yes, I do. I also think, and I think we are probably going to touch on that, but what the assistant looks like, going forward is, as partners, we all should be informed. Assistants need to be informed about the issues, about what's happening, because that is how we're going to help our executives steer an organization beyond the tactical, the tactical day-to-day tasks that we may do, which may be replaced by artificial intelligence. But we have to become informed and engage in these conversations so we can, help our executives steer the organization. But yeah, we're having more conversations, and a lot is coming to light. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time.
How has it been in South Africa with your network there and your colleagues and the people that you know? How are you looking forward to 2021?
If I think about from a country or location point of view, I think what's happening in South Africa, and like Julia said, all over the world, people in 2020, what happened was people lost their jobs, people were furloughed, they were put on short time, things like that. And what that did was it created even more anxiety in the market. So you already had a market where there was a whole flood of people trying to get the same job. Now you adding, let's say, 3 or 4-fold to it for the same people going for the same job. So it created a lot of anxiety in South Africa. Unemployment obviously in our country went up quite significantly, and that's obviously because of lockdown, and lockdown really impacted economic activity and all of those things. So that brought along a lot of anxiety. What I have heard and spoken to a few people is they have realized that and a lot of companies now have realized where the assistant actually sits. It's exactly the same, or I think it's on par with what happened when we had the big financial crisis, where people lost their jobs, household incomes were halved or quartered, or whatever the case may be. The same things now happen via a pandemic in COVID. So people have seen that the assistant now plays a more important role in the business than they ever did before. Where before, a lot of companies, and especially smaller companies, would think of the assistant as your, like they call in America, your admin professionals or your administrative assistants, where they would do the everyday tasks. What you're now seeing is companies going in and saying, actually, what I want is, can you come on board? Because we've now had to scale down the company, but we cannot lose positions that we had before. So can you come in and help with certain things? We're seeing a move from senior EAs moving up into business managers, where they start taking on a role which is a lot closer to the executive that they're working for, the ExCo committee that they're working with, which is a good thing, because again, it shows the world the role of the assistant. I mean, I would say for the last 8 to 10 years, the assistant role has slowly gained momentum in the media. We have a lot more prominent assistants coming to the fore and saying, well, I actually did that. And that was me. Although I didn't get the credit, it was me, and my executive then got his name put in the paper, or stood in front of the camera, or whatever the case may be. So assistants are moving into the role that I think, and I strongly believe they deserve, especially the senior EAs. They're moving into those roles of power. Like Nadine said, sitting at the table, whether you're the only person in the company, or whether there are 4 of you, or 5, or 10, or 20, get a seat at the table. And Nikki, you know, I'm of the opinion the assistant always sits inside. He never sits outside and waits for instruction. The assistant needs to be at that table and help steer the company, like Nadine said, in the right direction. Give the ExCo or the executive that you're working for, give him the direction that he needs, because often they're lost. It might not seem like they're lost, but they are. And when you walk up and you say, actually, I think you should do that, 9 out of 10 times they'll go and they'll take what you said and they'll implement it. So we're seeing a lot of assistants move into that role. We are seeing a lot of assistants, unfortunately, lose their jobs. But I think going forward into 2021, a lot of people are actually looking to move up the run in terms of what they're responsible for, how they contribute, because I think that word is a big thing. When you come to an ExCo or an executive and you say, this is how I want to contribute to your well-being or the company's success, they start taking you more seriously. So what I'm seeing is people stepping up and saying, actually, let's do this, or actually, let's do that, which is great for the profession, and then also great for other EAs around the world.
That's absolute music to my ears. Because, as you know, Shirwyn, we run a course on for assistants who want to move into a strategic business partnership role. And actually, I wanted to ask you, it's something that I talk about a lot, it's something that I train on a lot. And I wanted to see really if that is cascading down and it really is happening, because I think, you know, as I've said at the beginning, with things like travel and technology coming in so much more, playing such a bigger part, there is so much more capacity for assistants to do more in the organisation and really add value. But I just wondered on the ground how much that is actually happening. Julia, to bring you in, how are you finding it? I know you do a lot of work across Europe, so how are you finding it in Europe? Is it something that is moving forward or becoming a trend, do you think?
I think it is still a trend, and but there are different ways to understand this, working as a business partner, a strategic business partner for your executive, your manager, because it can be just a kind of the title, the position in itself, and also the way you see you yourself collaborating with your executive, with your manager, right? You don't need the title business partner or a strategic business partner to be working with your executive at this level, because I understand this working with your executive as a strategic business partner as the top level of collaboration. Because I think as assistants, there are different levels for us to operate in collaborating, supporting our manager and executives. And when we talk about partnership, it's really alliance. It's really like commitment to grow together, you know, to sharing vision and goals and really building things together. So this is what's partnership, right? So we sign partnership agreements, right? So there are a lot of objectives, very concrete things we want to accomplish, right? So then it means that it has to be a manager or an executive and an assistant that really want to sign this agreement for this kind of very high level of collaboration. But still, we can add value, you can collaborate and support our executives without being there, because there is extremely like you are one. It's like being married, you know, so it's really together and really sharing everything almost, right? And some managers, they don't allow assistants to work at that level. They don't want, they are not prepared, they are afraid, right? And the same for assistants. Some they are afraid of working at this level. Maybe they don't want. Okay, they want to work more, keep a kind of distance. I don't know, from this kind of relationship, because it's really it will always depends on the country, the culture, the organizational culture. Some companies, they don't allow assistants even to have access to their executive or manager's mail inbox, right? Yep. So which kind of access are they given, or opportunities to work at that level, right? So then we have to assess ourselves and see what I would like to do, where I would like to be in each level of collaboration, right? So if my manager is not giving me the opportunity to be his best business partner, so maybe I would have to find another manager. I have to move to find something else, or just adapt and accept what I have, the relationship I'm allowed to have with my manager and my executive. So there are a lot of aspects there, and I think social aspects and cultural and countries, they see the role of the assistant differently. And we have, I don't know, maybe 1,000 titles for what we do, or for our roles. So it shows how complex and how diverse can the relations we are having with our managers, the kind of tasks and the roles we have, they can vary. So, but for me, my experience is that I perform at my best when I have this relationship with my executive.
The one thing I would say, which is something you touched upon, is it has been good to see so many executives not flounder, that's not quite the word I mean, but not have all of the answers, because this is so unusual for most of us. I remember saying at the beginning of the pandemic to a group of assistants, your executive might not be getting in touch with you at the moment because they don't know what they're doing. So this is the time and the place when you have to be proactive, because so many executives that, you know, are just being completely thrown out of their comfort zone at the moment. So it's been a huge opportunity for assistants to step up. And what I was hoping would be something that came out of this would be that having those assistants that have stepped up this year will continue to step up, because they've seen what they are able to accomplish.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think, like Juliet said, 2020 it gave you mountains of opportunities where you could be your best, and you could show others what you could do. You weren't confined to a box. You got out the box because they didn't have the answers, like Julia said. They came to you and said, tell me what I need to do. And it's exactly the same thing I was saying, where assistants learned to communicate better in 2020. You had to go to your executive and say, what are you doing? You didn't have the luxury of sitting outside the office or inside the office if you're lucky enough to sit there. You didn't have the opportunity to know exactly what's going on. So 2020 gave us that opportunity to step up, which a lot of assistants took. It gave us a voice, I feel, in terms of who we are as assistants and what assistants bring to the business. And then it also showed flaws within the assistants. It showed things where assistants took for granted the fact that we were sitting outside and no one would see it. It became more prevalent where if you didn't deliver on something, they knew you didn't deliver on it because they'd ask you about it because you weren't outside or you couldn't run around and quickly get it. It would quickly catch up that you didn't do what you needed to do. So yes, it showed a vulnerability in the assistant, but more so it showed that any assistant can step up and help the organization move forward. A lot of organizations and a lot of people that I spoke to from large organizations were saying, I can't believe my assistant has been so great throughout this. I mean, they were the least affected by the pandemic. And it's not because we were the least affected, it's because we were the most equipped to deal with the pandemic in terms of business. We knew what was going on the ground. We knew what was going on in the C-suite. We knew what was going on with middle management. And we could say, this is what I think you need to do. So to me, 2020, loads of opportunity, also loads of times, loads of holes to fall in, but assistants stepped over those and they actually became MVPs during 2020, taking companies forward.
Yeah. So going into this year, I think the theme of the virtual summit this year is the key skills that assistants are going to need moving into 2021. Do you think, Nadine, if I throw this over to you, do you think there are any new skills that assistants should be looking at in 2021, or are there any skills that most assistants have currently got that they should step up a wee bit and maybe focus on?
I think it's important for us to utilize artificial intelligence in our personal lives, so then we know how to integrate it at work. So if you are in an environment where technology is not like at the forefront, still find ways to embrace it personally. So just in case your organization does pivot and is like, we've got to rely on technology. And so of course we have to be flexible, we have to be, open, open to new ways of doing things. And don't look at it as something that is replacing your work, but is enhancing what you do. And I think that's important, is how we embrace it and focus on technology. Flexibility is something that in our organization that we discuss, because you have some people that have been in the role for so long that they're rigid and they're not open to change. I'm sure you guys have experienced that when you have conversations and you have a new idea, especially if you come to like an EA roundtable at your organization, you have this new idea. You've got those that have been there 30 years or 20 years, and they're just like, that's not gonna work. So for any of us to stay relevant, we have to become very, very flexible and fluid. I look at my position as like, I always look at the ribbon in the sky. You know how a ribbon just kind of blows in the wind and it goes and it bends and it just looks beautiful. So I try my best, although there's things that I know I like and that work for what I do in my support role. I try my best to always be open for change, to say, okay, what I did yesterday may not work. Something different may work for today, and that's okay, because that means I'm growing and I'm changing and I'm evolving. So I think we have to embrace, if we already have those qualities, the willingness to be open and change. If we don't have those qualities, we need to put ourselves in environments where we are kind of forced to look at things differently, put ourselves in uncomfortable situations. And that way, when it happens, we're there to be able to solve the problem. and act. One thing that Shirwyn said earlier that really resonated with me was I always rely, I am relationship based, so I always rely on the feel of my executive. You know, that's something that I'm very sharp at, that reading the room, understanding where people are coming from, what they're saying may not be exactly what they mean. So reading body language, I mean, that's something that I'm that executive that's in the ear, I'm executive assistant in the ear, like, she's saying this, but she really means this, right? So because it's a skill that I've always had, it was difficult, you know, not being in the same space, you know, being at home and then now really trying to learn to read voices or the tension in the voice or, you know, where that person is. And then of course, trying to look on Zoom and read faces so then I can follow up after the conversation to say, you know, I think this person may feel a little tight about the conversation or tense. Maybe you should follow up with them because they look disconnected. Or, you know, if I've got a room full of 40 people and then I'm looking at people turning their cameras on and off, you know, what does that mean? You know, is that person in the conversation? Does that mean they disconnect? You know, so there's all these nuances, right? That, you know, it's like, it's challenging to think and look at.
That's you should do a session on that. I'm really happy to talk to you about how you do that.
Yeah, I actually, and that's the thing though, but it's a matter of being creative. That's my creativity to say, you know, I'm going to challenge myself to use a skill that I would use if we were in the same space while we're on Zoom. So then like I'm looking, if we're in a meeting with executives, most of them have their cameras on. You know, there's people that look disconnected, not a part of the conversation. And usually what happens is you get an email later and then it's like, it's spot on that, oh my God, I knew that's probably what they were thinking or feeling. So yeah, to Shirwyn's point, you know, he said that earlier. I just, you know, like you said, you have to find creative ways to let them know you're here, you feel them, you're connected with them. Is there anything I can do to help you? Like you said, the babysitting factor, you know, checking in.
I think one of the top skills that we really need to invest in learning this year is resilience more than ever. I think we still have a lot to learn because the pandemic is still here and we are going to still face a lot of difficulties and change, because the change will continue to happen faster and faster. And this we experienced it in 2020 was just like the beginning of this global changes that are going to continue to happen. So I think resilience is something very important for us, especially because we have so many responsibilities and have to manage strict deadlines and having tough people around us and difficult people. And so I really, and working from home, also for many women, it's still tough. And take care of children plus working and take care of the house. So I think we need to work more and more this resilience skill that improve this, because it's important not only for us in our day-to-day life at home, but also at work in our profession. And resilience make us be more agile. Resilience help us accept that we don't have the answers. It helps us understand that life, it's about long life learning, that we have to keep on learning new things because there are a lot of things we still don't know. And resilience helps us cope with the difficulties that we have. It helps us be more mindful, be more available to help other people, because we understand our limits, our weaknesses, and we understand our others' weaknesses and limitations as well. And I think another skill that very important, I think, is critical thinking and problem solving. We have to improve these skills, because now that we have been given this position to help our executives and managers in solving these complex problems that we have had. So when we are going to keep this position we have gained, like being sitting at the table and discussing and participating in the decision making. So we have to be good at critical thinking, at problem solving, in complex problem solving, and also active learning. Active learning is also key, because we learn when we discuss things with people, we learn from other people, we learn when we make questions, when we are curious, when we read everything we have available for us to read, and gain business acumen and understanding of what is happening in the world. You don't have to understand only what is happening in your department, but you have to understand what's happening in the world, in the whole industry. And then we really going to be this best partner of your executive as well, when we are good at also active learning and learning all the time, and being open with this open mindset to grow, to why I don't know this now, but I'm going to learn it.
Came up last year, which is something that Nadine's already touched on, which is diversity and inclusion. And I wanted to ask, because we've got a male PA and we've got all of you are people of colour, so I wanted to ask, what are the conversations we should be having next year to, well, keep the conversation going, so that it does, first of all, it keeps going and there are more changes made, very necessary changes made. So I wanted to touch on as well, being a male EA, Shirwyn, and we'll come on to that in a sec. But Nadine, if we start with you, what are the conversations going into 2021 we should be having, so that the conversations we started in 2020 actually lead to change?
I think it's a matter of, like you said, just continuing the conversation, but also bringing a sense of awareness, boldness. The only thing that's going to change is that if we're honest and open about certain things. And so if we are at the place of talking about equity when it comes to pay, and if we are aware that, there's a difference, and the person of color and the white person's access to higher pay there's like a difference. There's got to be a boldness to talk about those conversations. There's a vulnerability, of course, that comes on our white colleagues and allies, that they may share this information, but it doesn't kind of equate to the lack of support that we feel. Right. So there's a vulnerability that they have to be willing to have these conversations. This is what I make, and this is what this person makes. Let's figure out a way to move it, because we can dance around it for so long. But if anything is going to change, you're just going to have to hit the nail on the head and say, this is what we're facing. If we're talking about pay, we're talking about access to professional development opportunities. One of our surveys that we sent out, people were saying, there are those in our community have said that they've seen their white counterparts or colleagues being groomed for advancement, being groomed for opportunity. And I actually, when I was about 8 or 9 years into this role, I actually experienced that, where I trained someone, a white colleague that didn't have the experience that I had, and then she was elevated above me. So I was, I've experienced that firsthand. So those that have seen this, where their colleagues are being groomed for advancement, giving opportunity to professional development, and Black or persons of colors, the person of color is not given that same access or that same opportunity. So continuing the conversation, but continuing it with authenticity and willingness to be vulnerable and uncomfortable. And that's the only way that things are going to change. So,
So I guess training around having difficult conversations should continue into 2021, because we should
obviously
difficult and uncomfortable conversations, and actually take those in your stride would help a lot of us so much. I would assume. I think in general for the assistant role it would help, but to have these conversations, which are much needed, having training around that, I think would be beneficial.
Very much so.
Julia, to come to you, what would you say are the things that we can do to keep these conversations going?
I think it's very important to have all kind of people, all colors. Everyone has to be engaged in these conversations, because sometimes I hear like, oh, but I am a white people. I don't think I have something to say in this conversation. But everyone has to do with what's happening, or everyone has to do with a more diverse society, with inclusion, with belonging. We are all contributing to, we can all contribute to make things better. So it's not only a conversation that has to happen between only black assistants or white assistants or whatever, or poor, or it's about inclusion, it's about diversity. It has to be, the discussion has to be inclusive, right? So I think it's very important for us to keep the conversation going, doing this with authenticity is very important, what Nadine said, and do it as much as possible, because there are so many perspectives and there are so many people that don't understand the problem, you know, for different reasons. And I don't want to be critical, but there are different ways to understand diversity and belonging, and there are a lot of people that they don't understand, they don't see a problem, and so we have to help everyone understand what is going on, and have everyone having a say, having the participation, the opportunity to say something. So I think this is why how things have to happen now in 2021. Give everyone a chance to say something.
Yeah. And Shirwyn, to come to you, because I'd also like you to discuss it from being a male PA as well, or a male assistant as well. So I know you've mentioned before that you've had to have really strong conversations with people to get them past the fact that you're a guy working as an assistant. But just to come to you, how are you moving though? How do you think other male assistants can move those conversations forward if they've had those issues as well?
Yeah, so again, like Nadine said and like Julia said, the conversation needs to continue. And I mean, I took a stand 5 years ago to keep um, the male PA alive, if you want to call it that, where I made an effort to go to networking events where there were just females. I made an effort to go to training events where there were just females. I remember going to a conference in the US, and they split the conference down the middle, or not down the middle, I'd say 2/3 to the one side and 1/3 to the other side. So executive assistants went to the one side and admin professionals went to the other side. And I remember walking in the door and going, wow, there's a lot of males around. This is really cool. And then once people started going to their sides of the conference, you'd see all the males walk out and become admin, and they go to the administrative professional side. And there was, if I think about it, I could count the amount of males in one hand. And at that conference, they had over 2,500 people there. So it's just, what we need to do is continue the conversation around, yes, males could be PAs. Yes, males could be great PAs. Yes, males could be business partners. And the whole fact, what I feel we shouldn't do is exclude this from the diversity inclusion conversation, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create, like Julia said, an inclusive society that's inclusive of every color, every race, every gender, every ethnicity. We need to ensure that we start somewhere. It's like Nadine said, we could be running around in circles for the next 10 years talking about diversion and inclusivity. It's got to start somewhere. We've got to make, like we did, we've got to do small steps, take little steps at a time, and start doing things that bring diversity and inclusion and all of those types of things to the fore, so that companies and politicians and all of those high profile people alike start making this a priority. Because only until we make it a priority will we start seeing the successes of these conversations. I mean, it shouldn't have started last year or the year before. It should have started when 20, 30 years ago. That's when we should have started having the conversation, when we saw the split in West, when we saw the gender split, when we saw the race split. We should have had that when we saw the pay split. we should have started having those conversations, and we'd probably be a lot further than we are now. But I think as a male assistant, I can only say that we need to keep up the fight, because and I'm not talking in the literal sense of the word, but I'm saying let's keep having the tough conversations. Don't shy away from having that conversation. Why do we only have females? Why aren't we hiring males? Or why do we only have white people in the C-suite? I'm just making examples here. Let's have those conversations and get answers for them, because I think a lot of the time what we do is we ask the question and we walk away before anyone's given us the answer. Let's stand firm and wait for the answer so we can work towards a solution. So that's my take on diversity, inclusion, and being a male in the assistant world. It's nice to see a lot more males come to the fore now, but we need to see a lot more. I had a conversation with someone else yesterday, and they were asking me about being a male in a female-dominated society, and I said, well, it's not a female-dominated society. It just so happens there are loads of females and less males. It's a profession, and we are now taking it to a point where people are actually calling it a career. And before we start, we need to start defining what it is and what we want before we can start taking action. So
assistants, one of the ways to keep the conversation going in 2021 is also joining the diversity and inclusion committees in our organizations, for example. Asking to be a member, to participate, to join because we have something to share. And I think it's also a very important way for us to be more active in this field, and also read more and attend webinars, because there are so many things I'm learning. I have learned about diversity and inclusion, things that I was saying that I should not be saying, things I have been thinking that I shouldn't, because okay, now it's not correct, and why? Okay, oh yeah. So sometimes we are the people who need help sometimes, and to think different and to see to learn and about and understand diversity and inclusion and belonging. And so let's join, let's be part of committees, let's be the one who will create the first diversity and belonging committee in our organizations. Let's do this part of our job description.
And again, Julia, just what you're saying, yes, be a part of it, but let's not just, like Nadine said, dance around the subjects.
Right.
Let's sprint in the middle and start making a difference. You can only talk so much before people lose interest. So unless you actually start playing an active part in changing the situation, all we're going to talk for the next 20 years. And we'll still be in the same spot, we'll still be doing the same thing, and people will still be saying this. People will still be saying, oh, we should talk about it. Yeah, we spoke about it for 20 years. What have we done about it? Nothing. So let's bring something, and let's start being active and start putting things in place, even if it's something small. Like Julia said, start those committees within your businesses. Put your hand up when it comes to, do you want to do some research? Share your research. I mean, knowledge is key. The only way we're going to inform people is if we share the knowledge, what we've learned, how we're going to go about changing it. All it does, like I said, Nikki, it starts with one company, start with one person, it starts with one thought. It doesn't have to take 1,000 people. It takes one action and you can get a reaction. And that reaction will then ignite something that you would have never thought possible. And we'll see change.
I just want to piggyback, because when we were both like about to join in, and you brought out a good point, because I've heard people say, well, I'm exhausted. You know, these conversations are constantly happening. Here's yet another webinar. So like, how do you respond to that? And first, you know, it's always, I always look at something, whether it's exhausting or not, that if I'm not changing it for myself, I'm changing it for the next generation. So like you said, if, you know, the conversation can be had, and to the point that it's not about just talking, it's about being a disruptor. It's about being that first person, like you said, igniting the domino effect. You know, hey, if it takes that uncomfortability, if it takes you bringing in a report that shows that pay is off for these individuals and dropping it on your executive's desk. If we're going to do anything that's going to disrupt and actually cause change, it's going, like I said, it's going to be uncomfortable. And those people that have caused change in our world, you know, you may be ostracized for a moment, but thus believe that you'll be redeemed when that change happens, because you're on the forefront of it. So absolutely right, Shirwyn, that conversations are great, but it's absolutely important for us to take those conversations and put it in action, period, because we can be talking for the next 20 years just because we want people to feel comfortable, you know, speak the truth and speak the truth now. So,
yeah,
that's it. And in the digital world that we're living in at the moment, is that harder to do? Is that easier to do? It obviously needs to happen. We need to be moving the conversation into action. How can assistants do that in the here and now?
I think, and if I were to think about it, I think the digital world is actually perfect for what we're trying to do. The world's a lot more connected. People are seeing things that they never saw before. Using AI, using digital technology, using whatever medium you can to further that conversation, to pass over something to someone. And you don't know what's happening in Julia's company or Nadine's company. You don't know what they're talking about. So having that and sharing knowledge, and then in a connected society, is key to making this a success. Yes, I can make a change within my organization, but if it's only closed off to my organization, it makes no difference. It's sharing what we've done with other people and enabling them to use the model or the thought process or whatever we did to make it more inclusive or make it more diversified, sharing that with other people, blogging about it, putting it on your LinkedIn, sticking it on your Facebook, putting it on your Instagram, writing up a blurb. Do whatever you can to share the message, because the only way we're going to get through it again is if everyone participates. It might have started somewhere, but it actually affects every single person within the world. You might think, yes, it doesn't affect me. It actually does affect you. It affects you indirectly, or if you're a person of minority or a person of certain gender in a society or in a career, it affects you. So share the knowledge, have the conversations with as many people as you can, and use the digital world and the digital tools that we now have available to make a difference. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Well, time has run out. I could talk to the three of you on so many wide-ranging topics, and I think we've all found is last year has certainly made for a lot of wide-ranging topics and conversations to be had. So I really appreciate your time and your answers today, and your comments and your opinions. They've been really well put together, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with our attendees today, and I know that I've got a lot out of today. So thank you, all three of you, so much.